Tutorials are the backbone to lift up and teach all types of games. It is one of the most essential parts of the learning experience to make sure players can hop into the fun as soon as possible. In a sense, the tutorial can nearly define your whole game. A weak tutorial can easily reflect poorly on the rest of the game. And as a result, most tutorials these days feel extremely safe. Press the right button at the right time with the right gameplay feature until you prove your knowledge and are ready for the full experience. And all these tutorials are fine, they get the job done quickly and efficiently. However, looking back on one of my favorite games ever made, I was surprised to find that it didn't even have a tutorial in the traditional sense, or better yet, it was hidden. The game developers had so cleverly hidden the learning process amidst the fun of the game that without even realizing it, I had been subtly learning the different mechanics of the game the whole time. And today I want to highlight this clever piece of game design to show you how this game teaches you in secret. This is how Breath of the Wild hid the perfect tutorial. First things first, we must go over what makes a tutorial great in the first place. The goal of each tutorial is usually designed to teach you a system, a new set of rules that the game is going to be using for the remainder of the experience. Tutorials should be a place that allows you to experiment and make mistakes without grave consequences either. Should you make a mistake, the tutorial needs to give you some kind of feedback on your learning, where you should get rewarded for successfully learning and lightly punished when you do not. An infamous example is the Cuphead tutorial, a mini room that requires you to use the game's skills to advance. And the punishment is, well, not advancing. And being posted all over the internet. And finally, a key aspect that separates most good tutorials from bad tutorials is the pacing of information. Making sure the player is not overloaded with information and overwhelmed with all the new concepts, while also not keeping them completely in the dark on every aspect of the game either. And this part is often the most tricky. Many games often grab your hand and force you to learn the information one step at a time, which ends up taking away from the fun of the experience. However, pace your information right and the player will know just when to use the information they were given at the right times. So now that we know the basics of a tutorial, the question then becomes, how do you make the player learn by gaming? How do you subtly lead the player into not just knowing how to do something, but why they should do it and when to do the action as well? In order to make this learning process efficient, the game designer must to some degree anticipate the player's actions and lead them on a path best suited for both fun and experience. Which at long last leads us to probably the greatest tutorial of all time, Breath of the Wild. First off, what is Breath of the Wild tutorial? There's no playtest room or moment where info is dumped at you all at once, so it's a valid question. Maybe you could think of it as the first shrine you wake up from, or the 4 other shrines where you unlock your abilities later in the world. But the tutorial is far bigger than that. The genius of Breath of the Wild's tutorial is in the fact that the whole Great Plateau is the tutorial. Breath of the Wild has a massive open world with so many areas to explore and experience. So how can the game prepare you for such a daunting task? And the game's answer is by sinking down the scope and consequences of this area drastically. From the enemy camps to hazardous environments, the game shrinks them all down to a manageable size for you to explore. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's start at the very beginning. As soon as you wake up in the game, you are given total freedom over your actions in this small room. In case you do need a refresher on how video game movement controls work, there is some text at the bottom of the screen so that you can have the necessary info without it being too intrusive. However, with not much to do in the room and the earlier cutscene focusing on a certain area, you are given an idea of where to go. This table right here gives you the Sheikah Slate and opens the door to the next room, which should give the player a little idea of how the Sheikah Slate works and when it should be used. In the very next room, there are 2 chests that are practically impossible to miss as they are front and center as soon as you open the door. Opening them up gives you some clothes and quickly shows you how to equip them and work the inventory. Again, no intrusive information, just lightly guiding you with information on the side of the screen. Finally, after activating one more Sheikah table, the final door opens and you are greeted to the world of the game. As the opening cutscene finishes playing, you are shown a man off in the distance, and as soon as you get out of the cutscene, your camera is noticeably already turned to the point of interest, focusing you again on the next priority. Even if you try to ignore the man with cliffs on all sides, you are still guided on the path towards the old man. To further encourage you down the road, you will find a glowing item right away, which becomes your first weapon, which is a stick. Lovely. This same glowing sparkle can be found on some mushrooms nearby, showing you how you can determine what is and isn't an item, and how to collect them as you go. Also, when I was trying to remember the controls, I accidentally broke my tree branch early because I kept hitting the attack button instead of the jump one, which showed me that not only are weapons not eternal, but they have a set durability, so the player cannot be reckless with them. Thankfully, there was one on the ground not too far away, which again allowed me to not be punished for my mistakes so early after beginning the game. Now here there's a bit of an intrusive cutscene where a mark is put on your map and you are told where to go, which I'm not a big fan of, but I understand why the game feels the need to mark this area in particular. Plus, since the instructions are coming straight from Zelda, it should pique the player's curiosity to want to go there and explore this set waypoint. On your way, upon reaching the old man, you are able to ask him about where you are, where he gives you some quick information about the general area known as the Great Plateau. as well as pointing you to the Temple of Time, which is a new landmark to visit. Also, when you first approach him, a pop-up comes up to take a baked apple, which can easily be misclicked as you try to talk with him. He jokingly gets mad at you before telling you that cooked food is far better, which is all but confirmed when you open up the menu to see that the baked apple offers more hearts than regular apples. And sure enough, you can test this theory for yourself with an apple tree right nearby to help teach you the basics of cooking, which will have a vast importance later on. Just a few steps past the old man, you end up finding yourself your first competent weapon of the game, the axe. Assuming you still have your stick, the game immediately shows you how to switch weapons, which you will probably do immediately since, it's a stick. Not long after you pick up this axe, you are seen by a bokoblin and then thrown into your first combat encounter, which should go pretty smoothly with your new weapon. Not far later, another bokoblin appears with a much stronger weapon, and once again after killing him, you'll be guided to switching weapons with his new club, which is 1 point stronger. This whole encounter is just so ingenious, teaching you not just how to change your weapon, but putting you in situations where you want to switch your weapons, teaching you the why for different actions. This sort of teaching is what keeps Breath of the Wild's tutorial so fresh, as it keeps leading you to the reasons why you should use a skill or ability, so you can get some practical experience as you play. Also, by picking this club, you're also taught how to throw weapons, which gives you a new skill to use in combat. Exploring the temple, there are some jars lying around, where not only does breaking one of these jars give you some arrows, but the jars actually lead to a chest where you can unlock your first bow. The temple also has this statue that you can interact with, but it doesn't really do anything yet. As you make your way out of the temple and head towards the marker, you are likely to come across a little bokoblin on a watchtower. Seeing as you have the high ground, now would be a perfect time to try the bow you just got. For me, my first arrow missed, which to my surprise alerted the enemy as he tried to figure out where I was. This ended up being important as it allowed me to figure out that enemies can become aware of what I do if I'm careless, with my next shot hitting and my third shot actually being a headshot. I was treated with a rewardingly sweet sound and a small pop-up explaining the advantages of a headshot. As you have probably not alerted the other enemies yet, this is a good opportunity to teach the players about the advantages of stealth. The genius of these pop-up tutorials is the way they give you information when it's necessary. As mentioned earlier, too much information at once can overwhelm the player, especially if it won't be applicable for a long time. Nintendo's answer to this is to let you discover a move or ability for yourself, and then as a reward, you are given the information. Not only does that make it satisfying as a discovery, but now the information is not only important, but applicable. You do something and learn from it, and then the game gives you pointers to affirm your actions. Unfortunately, I did not learn how to be stealthy, as I ended up alerting the rest of the goblin crowd and dying to a noticeably different bokoblin both in color and equipment. From this, you can also gather that most oddly colored bokoblins are probably stronger than the rest, which brought me to my first game over screen and also showed me the direct consequences of death, which was not that bad, as you just get sent back to a previous save not too far away with a noticeable X where you had died. So, with my new knowledge, I headed back and tried to act more carefully. During my first encounter with the camp, you probably noticed some red TNT barrels that line the place. With all this TNT, it should bring the player to start thinking that there might be some way to light it. And sure enough, there's a hanging lantern conveniently framed by the base. Sure enough, by shooting it down, you cause a big explosion that wipes out most of the enemies at once. The creative framing of the area and the context clues make this discovery so rewarding, even if I would have missed it on my first playthrough. Unfortunately, however, the enemy then used the fire to his own advantage and lit his own weapon on fire, which is another brutal showcase of how interactions in this game worlds work. After defeating the enemies and clearing the camp, you are rewarded with a chest as noted by a mini cutscene and a quick jingle that plays when done. The reward from the chest gives you some fire arrows, which now shows you that arrows can come in many different forms, just as weapons do. This encounter's design also fascinates me because it happens all on the main road to your objective. It manages to teach you the basics of combat. From using your bow to the environment, you are able to completely dominate this encounter. In fact, I found another road later on that went the same way, which also teaches you about the interactions of the world, with a boulder that can be pushed onto some TNT which can kill some more bokoblins. Now, right in front of the marker, you are given one final group of bokoblins to beat. With that, you are rewarded with their equipment, which finally gives you access to a shield, now giving you the 3 most essential equipment items literally before you even know it. It was also at this point that I realized my inventory had a limit and I could not carry all the weapons I wanted, making you have to choose between the weapons you have. At last, arriving at the objective, you are met with a Shiga table, just like the ones you had been interacting with prior. Activating it triggers a major cutscene with towers rising up all over Hyrule. With the tower now activated, it now fills the gap in your map, giving you some new information on locations in the Great Plateau, without giving too much away either. Unlike some other open world games I know. Doing what a map does, it gives you new points of interest as well as giving you a scale for the world that you have to explore. A new cutscene from the tower also shows the true goal of the game. Hyrule Castle is surrounded by a cosmically terrifying monster shrouded in darkness. And it's really important that they bring this up now, but that's not our problem right now, it's time to focus back on the tutorial. With a full view of the plateau, I want to mention why starting the game on such a geography is such a brilliant choice. To avoid the character leaving for areas they are not prepared for, the open world is limited to just this plateau, with the lore reason being that you don't have a safe way down, which is all but confirmed when you actually try it. Yet because the plateau is separated from the open world, it allows itself to mimic the challenges of the world on a much smaller and safer scale to prepare the player for the game, much like the tutorial rooms I was mentioning earlier, making it the perfect space to explore freely while also being limited. This tower gives you a vantage point not just of the important areas of the Great Plateau, but of areas you'll travel to later in the game as well. Also, if you use your camera right here, you'll notice just how annoying motion controls are, leading you right to the menu to turn that thing off and never opening it again. With no other choice, you are given a way down, and once you reach the bottom, you run to the old man again. He fills you in on the restrictions of the Great Plateau, letting you know that you can only leave here with a paraglider, which only he seems to have. With an agreement to trade it for some treasure, you are given one final quest and lesson to be taught about the game. He then draws your attention towards a shrine which probably should have piqued your interest earlier, but now with a valid reason to go, you explore. And with the shrine activated, you are now quickly thrown into your first mini dungeon. Right away, walking up to the Sheikah table and activating it grants you your first ability of Magnesis. The game quickly tells you how to activate the ability, and from here on out, you are on your own. You are blocked in from all sides with no way to advance, but with the Sheikah Slate abilities, the ground glows and you can lift up some metallic floor plates, rewarding you with a nice jingle and a way to advance. You are then blocked by a cubed wall where you can use the magnesium cube to knock the rest of it down. Finally, you come across a simple enemy in a one-sided bridge, which, again, to advance, you must use the power of Magnesis to grab the previous bridge and move it over to advance again. And if you are really paying attention, there is a chest hidden high up that can be brought down with your magnesium. With that, you finally claim your treasure and leave the dungeon. In just this one dungeon, the game teaches you everything you need to know and expect from the power of magnesium. The trial of the dungeon being mini puzzle rooms that require some creative thinking to solve, items being hidden, conditioning you to look more carefully when you explore, and finally an item to reward you so you know what to expect in the next shrine. Also, if you use your magnesium abilities right outside the shrine, you'll find 2 more chests hidden just under the water, where with your new abilities you can pull them out for some rewarding items. Upon completing the shrine, the old man encounters you once again, asking you to complete 3 more shrines, which sounds like it's going to be a hassle, but then he teaches you the trick to fast traveling. Remember all those times you interacted with Sheikah tables in the past? Well, now most of these points have become your new fast travel locations, making the locations themselves a new reward and motivating the player to seek these places out. Also, a small and cool little detail is that when you activated the shrine for the first time, there's some little text that says travel gate registered to map, again rewarding you for paying attention, as well as hinting at their other purposes. Anyway, the old man guides you back towards the tower to show you the full advantage of high ground. Here he shows you how to use your camera to mark certain areas on the map, which is really neat. Even though this is a more direct way of teaching, I can see why it'd be hard to subtly tell the players about the mark feature. Another fascinating detail about their shrines is that even though you can do them in any order, because of their locations compared to you, there does end up being an intended way to do things, which works quite nicely. Also, just a weird note here, but Link asks a valid question of how does he know how the Sheikah Slate works? And he just says, I picked up a few tricks in the wild, so like, what does that mean? Of course, making our way to the second shrine, we come across the game's poster boy and most terrifying enemy. Now, while this does become a good opportunity to learn bits and pieces about the guard's attacks, because it's only stationary, it can only teach you so much for when you actually fight against the real deal. But it's still cool how they use this as a way to give you a taste of the dangers that lie in the open world. It's pretty easy if you time it to just outrun the laser and go climb the wall, but I imagine most players probably got a bit intimidated and tried the maze. If you do so, as you make your way to the entrance, you get kind of jebaited, as there are some rocks blocking the path and another guardian shows up, forcing you to climb the wall. Those rocks then becoming important later on. As we arrive at Shrine 2, we are then again introduced to the next Sheikah Slate ability, the bomb. Now this ability is a bit weird, as it gives you 2 bombs instead of 1, which certainly feels odd at first, yet the level is perfect for showing why there are 2 types of bombs. We are first introduced to the cracked wall, which has a small ramp leading down in case you want to roll the bomb down and explode the wall. Next, you are given a rotating platform, where if you try using the rolling bomb again, it will only roll off and not work. Thus not only asking the player to use the square bomb, but now showing us the key difference between the 2. The rolling bomb is good for distance, as it can roll and travel, and the square bomb is better for setting a precise explosion or trap. Or you could just, throw the bomb. Which again teaches you that there are multiple ways to solve puzzles and you are encouraged to think outside the box. A very clever game. The third puzzle also isn't terribly complex, as you have these moving pistons that push out at consistent intervals with a ramp next to one of them. Simply rolling your bomb down the ramp, letting it fly, and boom, exploding it, you are free to beat the level. Also, if you manage to take any damage during that encounter, you'll also learn that collecting spirit orbs at the end of shrines now allows you to heal, which is quite neat. And now when you exit the shrine, the rocks that blocked your path earlier should look familiar to the ones in the shrine, and you get to immediately apply what you learn. As you make your way over to the third shrine, you are more than likely to come across a small house on your way. Going in, you'll find that it is the old man's house, where if you catch him while he's sleeping, he'll tell you to wait by the fire until morning to talk to him again, which now teaches you that resting by fireplace is now past his time. However, if you continue to explore his house, you'll find some odd new food items, like spicy peppers or stemella shrooms, which will both come in handy later. There's also this book in the room which talks about making meals that keep you warm in cold places. Anyway, after switching to morning and making your way just outside the house, you'll find the third shrine at the top of this massive cliff amidst a large gap. Again, talking to the old man, he will give you some pointers on how to cut down trees. And with some trees near the edge of the cliff, you cut one down and aha, your very own bridge. There's also a set of broken rocks on the side of the cliff where you get to apply your Sheikah bomb abilities again, which is quite cool. Now, looking at the cliff, it seems way too high for your stamina bar at first, but with a little rock platform right up against the side of the cliff and one small platform not so far high up, you realize that you can actually beat this high wall by being smart about where you climb to. There are also some items glowing along the way that draw your eye towards a certain path to the different platforms. Slowly but surely, you make your way up to the top of the cliff, and with some patience, it becomes an easy obstacle to overcome, showing you again how even the most insurmountable tasks can be accomplished with a difference in mindset. Now at the third shrine, we unlock the ability of Stasis, used to stop the time of objects for a brief time. The first puzzle has a rotating platform that is rotating away from us, but by simply using Stasis on the gear, you can walk across the bridge easily. The second puzzle becomes a bit trickier as you make your way across a narrow hallway with a boulder rolling down. You can quickly run past it, but if you stop the boulder at a bad time, you'll have the boulder blocking your path as well. The trick is timing the boulder right, where if you do it right, not only do you get to move on, but if you actually travel a bit further up, you can stop the boulder before it even drops for a small extra challenge and reward. Finally, the third challenge is just a stationary boulder blocking the path, where now if you freeze it and start attacking it, you will now set it flying with the kinetic energy, teaching you all the applications of the Stasis ability. And now we finally come to the fourth shrine and the final obstacle, the weather. As I'm sure you noticed, there's been this unchanging weather icon at the bottom of the screen, which hasn't really meant much yet. But as we make our way up the mountain, the music changes and the temperature bar drops to cold, and now a new problem arises. How do you stay warm? Unfortunately, no matter how hard you try to power through this, you are not going to be making it to that fourth shrine unless you find a consistent way to deal with the cold. One such way I ended up trying was with fire, which seemed doable, but it was quite hard. To my luck though, just outside one of the entrances to the mountain, there was this camp where you could collect a bunch of spicy peppers and a cooking pot and a torch. Using the ingredients gathered in the info from the old man's book, you are able to craft food with different properties, and thus with the power of spicy peppers, you are able to make food that helps you deal with the cold. Also, if you manage to find the old man again, he will give you some more cooking tips of his own, as well as a little quest if you make the dish of his cookbook. I ended up trying to do this task, and it actually taught me the value of hunting. By using your bow and keeping quiet, you can one-shot most creatures and get their meat. And by finally crafting his recipe, he then in turn gives you some warm armor, and thus not needing you to worry about the temperature again. This here is yet another example of how the game creates open-ended problems with such a wide variety of solutions, made to suit a variety of playstyles. In fact, it's so creative that I only thought of the fire strat while making this video. And I thought I stumbled upon a new idea, only to find that there are many little bonfires to light your way along the path, making the strat feel like it was intended the whole time. This affirmation of your creativity is what makes this game so beloved. And with all these various ways to solve the weather, we finally make our way to the last shrine. Our final shrine unlocks the power of Krynos. The first obstacle is a simple wall where you can just use the ice to either lift yourself up or make a pillar and climb up it to advance. Next, there's a gate blocking your path, which can also be easily lifted up by placing some ice underneath it. One simple enemy later, you finally arrive at a seesaw, which can also be lifted with ice, with a hidden chest also achieved by making another path over the water. Honestly, this one was the most simple and straightforward tutorial so far. Whether it's because the ability doesn't have vast applications, or because of the practice from the previous shrines, I'm not totally sure. Though it's honestly probably the first one, it wasn't terribly amazing. Now with all our major abilities save for one, the old man pays us a visit once again. He tells us to meet at the intersection between all the different shrines, where he will there tell us everything. A quick look at the map reveals that the intersection is the Temple of Time, and again I must respect Nintendo for having such faith in the player to figure this out on their own, rather than just giving us a simple destination, letting us solve the riddle and make the discovery for ourselves. With that, the old man disappears into a poof, also creating an aura of mystery around the whole thing, which spikes creativity further. Upon entering, you'll notice that the statue is now glowing, which immediately catches your eye with the light surrounding it. Once you interact with it, you are then given the choice to use your spirit orbs you've been collecting in the shrines to either upgrade a stamina vessel or a heart container. The only correct choice obviously being the stamina container, stamina gang for life. I love this part of the game so much because now it shows us our main way of upgrading across the game. By collecting 4 different spirit orbs, you can level up one of the 2 abilities upon interacting with a statue found in the land, with all the spirit orbs found in the shrines that we had been practicing in this whole time, which are also dotted wondrously around the map. Succeeding in the upgrade, the old man appears at the top of the building, beckoning us to come up for our final encounter. Once you meet with him, he reveals his true identity as being the previous king of Hyrule, who had died 100 years ago and whose spirit had been residing here since. Now, as a story reason, it begins to make sense why the old man was able to know so much and why he was always around when we needed him. He then gives a history lesson on the world and how it got to this point, and about the war between Hyrule and Ganon. With our purpose and mission now given to us, the player is now not only ready for it, but they have truly earned it. Finally, as promised, with the most beautiful jingle, we unlock the legendary paraglider. We then get the mission to kill Ganon, which will be our main objective for the rest of the game, and since we start up way up in the temple, we get to test our glider right away, and with that we are free and finally off into the wild. And that is the Great Plateau and Breath of the Wild tutorial. Combining all the footage together, I spent nearly 4 hours in this area alone, and enjoyed every second of it. Nintendo gives you every opportunity to learn and explore for yourself. It used that creativity to teach you in amazing ways. You learn the basics of all forms of combat, from swords to bows, as well as how to efficiently use them. You learn how to use all your Sheikah Slate abilities and apply them in the world. You learn how to best interact with the world as you explore. You learn how to cook and heal and use all the resources you collect. You learn how shrines work and how to use them not just for fast travel, but to solve puzzles and collect spirit orbs, which can then be used to level up. All this is taught to you gradually as you explore this mini version of the open world experience. By the time you are ready for the open world, you are vastly well equipped, and it's not the game handing you some open world's basic survival kit, it's you earning every part of it. And believe it or not, there is still more to learn, from the small Koroks that lie around helping you expand your inventory, to the final Sheikah Slate ability in Hateno Village. However, if we continued on beyond the Great Plateau, we would be here all day, but that's what makes this game so great. The game always feels like there is more to try and more to learn. The game takes full advantage of your creativity and lets you cook. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, please consider subscribing as it helps a small channel like mine immensely. With that, have an amazing day and I hope to see you again soon.